Welcome everyone. The topic for the day is control and validation of schedule management. Basically, today we will understand how to keep a tab on every processes of schedule management. And this is the process that we are going to talk about it. This is the table that we are going to dissect today for understanding in details the various control procedures, the various valedictory metrics that is included for your schedule management process altogether. Come, let's embark on the journey. So, what exactly it is? Let us understand. Now, knowledge areas. We will talk about the knowledge areas as in this particular matrix, which has been located out here, is identified an area of the project management defined by its knowledge requirement. It describes in terms of various components, various processes, different practices, the different ingredients for inputs and outputs, the various products that comes around it, and the tools and techniques to arrive out here. Remember, project management process group. This, please understand. Project management process groups are these groups that we are looking into it. It engages in the logical grouping of specific projects in terms of initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and eventually closing out. On the other hand, this was all about grouping, but what about the project phase? It's the logical activities that culminates into one or more deliverables. So what are they? They are initiation. We need to plan them out. We are executing them out, and ultimately we'll be closing out here. So then now to understand, there are three metrics that we talking about. One is the project management process groups and the phases around it. Phase one, phase two, phase three. In between the phases, what are the process groups that needs to be taken around it? Now this has to be encompassed with the knowledge areas. Remember, under knowledge will be your integration, your scope, your scheduling, cost, quality, resources, communication, risk, procurement, stakeholders, and things like it. Please make a mental note of everything that comes around it, or best possible, please watch this video again, time and again, to understand the various metrics that are used to control management. So we will start with the integration part of it. So there are three areas that we have already spoken: the knowledge, the phases, and the groups. So first and foremost thing, we'll start with the integration. It's the activities that identify, combine different attributes all together. Please understand, this is what project management phase is all about it. So let's say in the first phase, which is of group initiating, there are only two activities, that is about integration, and which includes the stakeholders into play, the major stakeholders, the top management, the parties that relates to the fact that yes, we are going to undertake a project. And then comes what is the scope of the project. Look at the scope of the project. It is included in your planning phases. It is including the planning as a group activities. It is a part of everything that comes into your execution phases, which you need to understand what is the number of manpower you require, what are the various resource material as an ingredient which is required. You need to understand, define the scope, the validity of the segment or the arena which it is going to encompass, the project is going to encompass. We come into the scheduling process. If you can control this thing, then we have to schedule or probably give a time orientation. Look, you yourself have scheduled yourself to watch this video as of this point of time. The initiation was that you want to understand everything about selection or anything about project management or about schedule management, the way you want to go around it. Now is the time that you have found your time to watch this particular video and educate yourself as to what are the control metrics. So here come the scheduling. Once if you have done it, there is something, the next factor which comes around would be your cost element. Look at it. It is a process involved in planning, probably estimating, budgeting, financing, funding, managing the controlling of all the cost that has been associated. Where it has been done, it is again been done again in the planning phase and the monitoring and controlling phases. Why? Because cost needs to be monitored. it needs to be controlled, or else it will go out of your hand and the project might go topsy-turvy. That is something which we cannot do it. So we need to complete the project within an approved budget. Yes, cost is a vital element. Look here, look very clearly. I will talk and I will initiate it in subsequently. Let us the next knowledge areas of quality. It is about incorporating the policies, how quality conscious the organization is all about it. If we are quality conscious oriented, so then we have to plan it, we have to manage it and control the project with the product quality requirement, the requirement which has been stipulated, which has been demanded by the projects, that needs to meet the expectation of the various stakeholders. So where are we doing into it? We are not only in planning phase, which is there, but also on the execution phase. So we are present in all the phases, and this, remember, is marked as one. So as the number one activities that needs to be started out in terms of quality control is process is all about it. We have to be very conscious. Let us come to the next knowledge areas of resources. Resources is to identify, is to acquire, manage the resources, be it capital, be it manpower, be it technical know-how, or whatever resources you look at it for the successful culmination of the project. Yes, again, it is in execution process, it is in planning methods which we need to go around it, and in the controlling process. So you have to go this in fact into the resources. We start at the very beginning, and this is earmarked as number one, where in execution process this is not at the very beginning but probably at the last end of the fag end of the process altogether. But planning is the second step that comes around it. Let us come onto the knowledge of communication. Remember, communication, we start initiate the project with the communication itself, we culminate the project with the communication itself. It needs to be communicated thoroughly during the happening or execution of the project altogether. So it has to be there in the planning, in the execution, and the monitoring and controlling. What does it mean? It means to ensure timely appropriate data collection, timely appropriate distributions of resources, timely appropriate creation and storage of various data, retrieval of data, the management control, the monitoring, and ultimate disposition of the project information per se. So that is what the knowledge areas is all about it. We come into the risk factors of knowledge area, as the case might be, the processes of conducting risk management, planning, identification, analysis, responses planning, which we need to do it during the implementation process. We need to monitor the risk of the project. Excuse me. We have to understand why a particular task is being entrusted upon it. We have to go into either of the planning phases or of the execution phases, because believe me, after initiation it is the only two phase that counts and that matters altogether. There we comes around it the risk, which is where it is only in the planning phase. Remember, we cannot predict the risk, so probably we have kept it at the optimum level, the last level of activities as far as planning is concerned. Definitely risks are to be mitigated during the executing time, during the monitoring and the controlling of the project. We need to be proactive rather than be reactive. We need to monitor all those data points that needs to be kept around it in the communication processes. The resources out there which we need to understand it. Let us come to the procurement of the raw materials, the resource material. Now this can be taken from the absolute raw materials which can be taken out of. There are nothing, no manipulation, no execution, no value added services which has been done around it. Or we could have a resource or input material which is value added products altogether. We might have some vendors supplying it out. Now we need to understand the quality that the vendor is supplying, or we need to educate the vendor about the quality that is expected from them. As such, it's necessary to purchase the product, the services which is needed from outside the project team without compromising on the quality. Remember, planning, executing, and monitoring and control, everything is a first hand activity. Don't forget of the buttons that have been utilizing it. I will definitely tell you why a particular activity is done on which particular fashion. Let us come to the last areas of stakeholders. The process requires to identify people, groups, organization that could impact or probably be impacted by the project, to analyze stakeholders expectation and their impacts on the project, develop appropriate management strategies for effectively engaging stakeholders in project decisions and execution. The way you want to go around it, this is where we need to understand about the stakeholders. And remember, in the stakeholders thing, everybody is of a priority, right at the initiation, right at the execution, right at the planning processes, right at the controlling processes, everywhere it comes around it. But if we come to know, now we have understood why the knowledge areas and where it has been implemented. Now let us start with the initiation, the process of performance to define a particular project, or in this case a new project. Or let us be very fragment the project into phases, also a new phase of an existing project, by obtaining authorization to start the phase of the project, as the case might be. So we have 1 plus 1 2 activities that needs to be taken care of. Yes, that is the thing which we need to understand altogether. Next come to the planning phases, which requires to establish the scope of the project, the ambit of the project, what are the verticals and the horizontals that needs to be taken into consideration, refine the objective, define the course of action required to attain the objectives that the project has to undertake to achieve the quality. Remember, see, look at it. We have the highest focus out here, which is all about the planning. This is the highest focus. The second highest focus would be your monitoring and controlling, which will come into the next slide, which we also will explain all together. So this is very important. Let us come into the execution phase. Vital, because if everything is planned and according to plan, this should be a cakewalk for every one of us as a project team member. But in case there are mishaps, in case there are unfortunate things happening to the project, you have to keep your toes on the fingers. Absolutely, you should keep your heart on your sleeves and work for it, to perform, to complete the work defined in the project management, to satisfy the requirement of the project. This is where we need to understand, except for the scope. Remember, except for the scope, the schedule and the cost, which is beyond the ambit of the execution part, rest everything has to be involved. Let us talk about integration, let us talk about quality, resources, communication, risk, procurement, even the stakeholders. Everything should be kept into, are notified, they should be in. Let us now begin with the monitoring and controlling, the second most important factors altogether after planning that comes around it, which essentially means to track, to review, to regulate the progress and performance of the project, identify any areas in which changes to plan are required, and initiate those changes, communicate those changes, and execute them to the requirement, to the final things. And last but not the least is the culmination project that comes around it. You have nothing to do, it is the integration part. You are integrating nothing but everything which is mentioned out here as far the knowledge areas are concerned. Everything needs to be integrated and culminated into the closing section that comes around it, and that's the only activity that comes around here. Now we'll talk about the other processes that comes around. Now what is other processes that comes around it? Now let us talk about what, just if we have to do about it, the project management process altogether, why we are going to believe it or not. uh, there comes around it. Now is the project management phase. Now everything could be clicked out to here. Look at the integration process. The moment it comes around, in the integration process, during the initiation, what do? We don't do anything but develop the project charter. Absolutely out here. What do we do out here? The stakeholders identify who are the key stakeholders, who are the vendor, who are the vendee, who approves the project, who allocates the budget. We need to understand the stakeholders during the plan process. Let us come out here. This is where the master project plan would be coming around it. It is again under the integration that comes around it. During the scope of the project is something which is very vital. We'll tell about the scope management, collect the requirements, collect the various data set, define the scope, and create WBS. What is WBS? I repeat, work breakdown structures. Everything, the all the work has to be broken down into fragments, be it a job, be it an activity, be it a task, whatever fragmentation that you can do. Please go to the minutest of detail. The minuter the detail, the better the execution would be, and the hassle free the project manager would be all about it. Next is all about the scheduling part. Now, where is the schedule management? You need to plan your activities, what after what. Remember the critical path method that we were talking around it. Remember program evaluation review technique philosophy that we look into it. We sequence those activities. We estimate the activity duration, the duration in which a particular activity would finish, would get completed, and accordingly develop your schedule. Then comes your costing. In the planning section of the cost, remember we are talking nothing but planning the cost and estimating the cost as what can be doing. If the project is of a longer duration, you have to estimate and integrate the inflationary pressures within the cost and thereby determine the budget. Let us come to the planning of the qualities. Here you talk about the quality circles. What are acceptable quality that you determine? What is the things that you are that is particularly not acceptable, and so on and so forth. Then comes the resources. Resource management needs to be sustainably done if required by the project manager. Where are you getting it your things from? Is it to be outsourced altogether? Is it to be outsourced within the boundaries of that country or with the beyond the boundaries of the country? And similarly, please estimate the activity resources accordingly, which needs to be taken care of. Then comes your communication flow of communication will actually stipulate or actually ensure whether the project is going to be successful or not. We will talk about the risk. Now this is the case of risk management. We need to plan it, validate the risk, identify them as on when on basis, perform qualitative risk analysis, perform quantitative risk analysis. The number of risks that can come up, it can be a technical breakdown, it can be a political uprooting, it can be anything, it can be anything. Think about all eventualities and plan your responses accordingly. That is what is to be meant out here in terms of procurement. Plan the procurement management. Who are the vendors in case one of the vendors fail? Who are the backup vendors that has been planned around here? That is needs to be identified. Yes, the stakeholder engagement plan, wherein which all stakeholders can contribute in whatever fashion. Do integrate them. Do ensure that they actually procure it. Then is the managed project work of integrations. This is where you are executing your project work. You are actually managing on the flow. The managing quality is again one of the matters where you have to actually make it work, because it is your quality which will determine the acceptability from the of the project, whether it has the feedback is very good or bad or not so good, as the case might be. There comes the acquire resources or develop teams, manage team. It's the building the team culture within your organization. There you have the communications. This is how the communication needs to be taken down. It has to be filtered, it has to be streamlined, and everything needs to be dedicated all together. We will talk about the risk responses. What are they? How can it be curated in benefit of the project altogether? We will talk about the conducting of procurement. Definitely yes, this is when the project is at full swing. People are rendering services, people are rendering resources, people are rendering all input materials and coming up with the output things, as the case might be. Then comes the stakeholders engagement, as and when on basis which all stakeholder can chip in for the benefit which benefits the project managers in the long run. We need to have the most important, the second most important aspect of project is monitoring and controlling the project work, performing and change control, which you need to understand a new methodology, a new process that needs to be incorporated, and that is where we need to come up with. Then there's the scope factors, wherein we need to agree what was the scope at the onset of the project and how are we fearing it out. So we need to control them, we need to validate the scope. Here comes the schedule part. Schedule part need not be absolutely watertight. It should be flexible so as to adjust or accustom or accommodate any changing things that might happen, any upcoming things that might get impacted onto the project. That needs to be understood. So schedule needs to be controlled. Controlling of the cost is the vital factor. The moment the cost is controlled, it means the profitability of the projects becomes enhanced. need to talk about the quality at no way should be compromising even at the basis of the cost. Remember, if the feedback goes bad, from bad to poor, you will not get another assignments, another project which you cannot afford at all. Then comes the controlling of resources. Yes, not misusing any of the resources, not probably optimum utilization of the resources should be the goal around it. Then we have the communication. This communication needs to be understood within the stakeholders and beyond the stakeholders or beyond the project teams. How what has been communicated, how it is communicated. Remember, the image of the company, the image of the project does matter at the long run. We need to always monitor those risks. Definitely, yes, this risk is everything which will help us to integrate the successful culmination of our project all together. Then is of procurement. If and when on wave, if the prices of the raw materials are fluctuating, you need to ensure that when prices are at the bottom rung, please plan accordingly. Please identify or order suitable amount of resources at that optimum time so as to smoothen the effect of the price variations over the project cost around it. Then comes the monitoring of the stakeholders. Now this is where the stakeholders will come in case the stakeholders are in the very initial stage and the prices of the raw materials are quite at that day. Probably ensure them to purchase more, or for that matter, if the prices of the raw materials have been hiked up several times and the stakeholder might not be willing to go around it, and make them understand, communicate with them thoroughly, make them feel that if we are compromising on to the resources, we are compromising on the quality of the project. So please ensure that all your stakeholders are on board altogether. And last but not the least would be successful culmination of the project. Other might be therein comes around it. Remember, we have 49 processes to achieve the project objectives. That is been included, and I have explained each and every point for the control and validation of the schedule management. Thank you for watching this video.